Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru Amen. What a beautiful melody. I thank the cantor for last night during her davening, putting that one in again. It reminded me of it. I love it. So beautiful. So, before we leave each other today, I wanted to offer a couple words of Torah. So, you know that we live in a world in which we are bombarded by images, but we're also bombarded by sounds and noises. As I mentioned earlier this morning, how disrupted I was by the sound of the leaf blower of the man next door. Pretty sure that they are illegal in Westchester right now, these leaf blowers, but I guess everybody makes their own rules, whatever. It destroyed my morning, just the sound. And I couldn't turn it off for whatever reason. You know, it's interesting. I can sit in my backyard and I can listen to the birds chirping. I can hear the woodpecker that wakes me up every morning. It doesn't bother me. For some reason, the sounds of nature are one with which I feel at home and completely comfortable. But other sounds are so noisy. I wish it were so easy that I could decide which noises I would listen to and which ones I wouldn't, which I could turn off and which ones I could turn up. But it's not all that simple, as this week's Parsha points out to us. So we arrived this week at the portion of Behar Bechukotai. They're the last parshiot of the book of Vayikra. And as I mentioned last night in my Dvar Torah, I'm so tired of Leviticus. I'm tired of the book of Vayikra with all of its sacrifices. God knows we're making sacrifices right now. It's enough. It's time to get back. But thank God we're finally finishing the book of Vayikra so we can start the book of Bamidbar. To go from the sacrifices into the wilderness, that's exactly the experience we're going to have, because returning to normal is going to be the returning to a wilderness in which we really don't know which way to go. And that's exactly what this week's Parsha is supposed to be teaching us. And that is, we finish one book, we enter another, we know what happened, we don't know yet what's going to be. And then this week's Parsha adds another level of anxiety because it introduces for us the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year, the time in which we're supposed to allow our land to lay fallow and do nothing with it. We should have worked diligently for 6 years so that on the 7th year we would be ready. And the lessons that apply today are manifold. We should have done the work in preparation for what this could have been, the experience of a pandemic. We should have stockpiled the necessary medical equipment, and that's exactly what this week's Parsha says to us. Wouldn't it have been great if we had prepared better and not waited till the very last minute? Says this week's Parsha, there are going to be people who will suffer. There will come a point in society where there will be an inequitable distribution of wealth. There will come a moment in which we recognize that not everybody has their fair share. And that within the ideal tradition, the utopian society that the Torah imagines for us, there will come a moment in which we can level the playing field. We can say to ourselves, nobody should suffer. Al tikach mi'ito. Don't take from other people so much. Understand there has to be a moment in which we redistribute. That's an ideal world, a utopian society. I'm not suggesting we return to that kind of life, but there is something in the value of what it means not to make each other suffer so much. And there has to be at some point an awakening, a moment of understanding and enlightenment, if you will. And maybe this is it. But there's going to be moments in the evolution of society in which there will be people who have and people who have not. And the Torah understands that well because it talks about the Eved Ivri, the Hebrew servant, who should at some point be allowed to go free. And the Zohar immediately picks up on this question of there should be a moment in which everybody gets to go free, but the Torah talks about what about the individual who doesn't want to go free? The Zohar reminds us that there is a out for those people who want to remain in servitude. Something that's incomprehensible to the person who longs for freedom. The idea that there would be an individual who would say, you know what? I like what I have. This is good enough for me. I'd rather stay right where I am. And so the Zohar says, V'higisho Adonav Elo Elohim. It recalls for us the moment in the book of Exodus when it says, if there's an individual who wants to stay in service to another person rather than in service to the Almighty, V'higisho Adelet Oel HaMezuzah, that he should be taken to the door, V'ratzah Adonav Et Ozno B'martzeh V'avdo Leolam. And you should put an earring in his ear. And then he can remain in servitude to the human master rather than in God. And the Zohar asks a question, what is this ritual all about? And it answers the question for itself. It says, you take him to the door and you say you want to go out, you can go out. We're right here, standing on the precipice. But if you want to stay, then I'm going to do something to your ear. Because there's something wrong with the way you have learned to listen. That is the message of this week's Parsha. And that's the question we ask ourselves every day. Who are you listening to? Are you listening to the noise that's outside, or are you finding the inner calm, the peace that resides in each and every one of us? Are you listening to Fox or CNN? Are you listening to MSNBC or C-SPAN? Are you watching your Facebook feed? Where are you getting your information, and what are you listening to? Are you listening to the people who say we have to remain closed forever, and we're saying, or you're listening to the people who say we have to open up immediately? You need to make some choices for yourself based on what you are listening to. This week's Parsha says to us in the clearest of language, be careful who you listen to, because if you listen to the wrong people, you will remain enslaved. Because we recognize there comes moments in the history of civilization in which there will be horrible things that happen. And individuals will suffer terribly. And we who are watching say to ourselves, how do I avoid that circumstance? Who should I be listening to? Should it be to the doctors or to the politicians, the economists, or our religious leaders? Hearing depends on the place where you're getting your message from. Says the Zohar. By hearing depends on the place. He's taken to the door. He says, look, you can see a free world outside. You don't have to see just what's in front of you here inside the home. Look, there is an entire world out there, and if you still choose to stay here, you will be forever maimed. Oh, how our tradition longs for freedom. Zeicher l'tziat Mitzrayim, the recollection of the exodus from Egypt, is something we say on a regular basis because we long for freedom, even though the safety of slavery seems so secure. We recognize the importance of freedom. And it's a freedom that sometimes we have to provide for other people. When you see how your brother has come to ruin, and that he could buckle under your hand, recognize the power you have to influence other people. So be careful, not just in who you're listening to, but what you're saying to other people. The language of Shema Yisrael, listen to the people of Israel, is so incredibly important because it teaches us that we have to be careful who we're listening to. I have to tell you honestly, growing up, went to yeshiva as a young boy, raised by a conservative family, parents fully embedded in the conservative movement. It was hard to know as a young child who to listen to, my Orthodox rebbeim or my parents raising me in the world of conservative Judaism. And as I grew, I began to hear a variety, a cacophony of different voices, Orthodox Rebbeim, Reform philosophers, conservative role models. And I had to begin to learn as an adult what it meant to have a discerning ear. The greatest challenge I had in college was Music 101. I couldn't tell the difference between the different musical instruments because I didn't have a discerning ear. This week's Parsha says, who am I listening to? Where do I get my advice and counsel? What channels do I watch? Which newspapers do I read? And can I hear an inner voice? This week's Parsha says, amongst the noise that exists outside, we have to learn how to turn off some of those sounds so that we can hear the inner voice of sanity, the inner voice of compromise, the inner voice of balance. So when I ask you, who are you listening to? I hope you're listening to your inner voice. Shabbat Shalom. Well, I have to tell you, I think I completely exhausted myself today. But not too exhausted to share a few little jokes with you. So a roast beef sandwich walks into a bar and orders a beer. The bartender says, sorry, we don't serve food here. We don't serve food here. Okay, it's a good one. Why did the Clydesdale give the pony, why did the Clydesdale give the pony a glass of water? Because he was a little horse. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. There are two muffins baking in the oven. One muffin says to the other, phew, is it getting hot in here or is it just me? The other muffin says, talking muffin! Just do it one more time, just for myself, okay? There are two muffins baking the oven. One muffin says to the other whew, is it getting hot in here or is it just me? The other muffin says, talking muffin! Oh, that's my favorite one. They all go downhill from here. What lights up a soccer stadium? A soccer match. Why shouldn't you write with a broken pencil? Why should you not write with a broken pencil? Because it's pointless. This one, you're going to have to really think very, very hard about it. You'll get it by my delivery, I hope. If not, it's my problem. What's the difference between bird flu and swine flu? One requires treatment, the other requires ointment. Treatment? Ointment. I think I delivered that one well. After a crime, a detective noted that he thought it was foul play. The other detective said, you mean he was playing with birds? That's just a ridiculous one. This is the last one for today because it's really quite funny if you think about it. What did the policeman say to his belly button? You're under a vest. You're under a vest. You're under a vest. All right, so that's it for now. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Enjoy the rest of your quiet time together. And hopefully I'll see you soon, either on Zoom, streaming on Shabbat, wherever I see you. come by my house. You can wave at me through my window. Talk to you soon. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Peace out.